A woman named Sarah Robinson was getting ready inside of her cabin on the 7th floor of a massive cruise ship. She and her boyfriend were going to dinner that night with Sarah's parents in one of the restaurants on board the ship. And in fact, this entire trip, this whole vacation, was actually a big gift from Sarah's parents to Sarah and her boyfriend. And so far, the trip had been totally amazing. I mean, all four of them, Sarah, her boyfriend, and Sarah's parents, had got to go swimming and drink great drinks and have great food. And it was just like a total dream. But now they only had one night left, tonight, and they wanted to make the most of it. And so after Sarah and her boyfriend were all ready, they left their cabin and they met Sarah's parents out in the hallway. And then Sarah led the way towards the stairwell that would bring them up to the 10th floor where the restaurant was that they were going to. Once they reached the 10th floor, Sarah could see right in front of her the entrance to this restaurant. And so she, her boyfriend, and her parents, all behind her, began walking towards the restaurant. And to get there, they would have to walk past this sort of lobby right in front of the restaurant where there was this elevator bank that would go down to the lobby and all the other floors. And so, Sarah and her family, they walked past these elevators. And as they did, Sarah began to hear what sounded like rain hitting the outside of the ship. But that didn't make any sense because that whole day the weather had been beautiful and clear, and Sarah, when she heard this sound, she instinctively kind of looked around the corner out one of the windows and she looked out into the night and it was still clear and beautiful out. So this could not be rain. And so Sarah, she turned around and she looked at her boyfriend and her parents with a sort of quizzical look, being like, "Do you hear this? Like, what is that sound?" And they clearly had heard it too and were looking back at her like, "I don't know." But before they could even start to discuss whatever this was, a woman who they didn't know, who was standing near these elevators as well, began to scream. It would turn out just a few minutes before this woman began to scream, the cruise ship's chief electrician, 66-year-old Jose Sandoval Opazo, had begun doing routine maintenance on the elevators that were located a few floors below the 10th floor, but still within that same elevator bank that could bring you up to the 10th floor where that restaurant was. And while Jose was performing this very routine and quick maintenance on the elevator, something strange happened. But to understand why this happened, you need to understand a little bit about Jose and the other electricians on board this cruise ship. So there was oftentimes a lot of very quick and easy maintenance that would need to get done on these elevators, which would involve going into the elevator shaft to do it. But again, these are very short bursts, in and out, very easy to do. All the electricians know how to do it. And the procedure was to actually fully shut down that elevator, like completely, and then go inside and do the maintenance, and then go through the process of starting the elevator all over again. But that was so disruptive to the flow of traffic on the ship each day, and it was just kind of a hassle. And so Jose and the other electricians had come up with this sort of workaround that didn't require them to shut down the elevator. And so what they would do is they would wait until the elevator car within the shaft they needed to do maintenance on was at some other level, like on floor 2, and they would go into the elevator on like floor 8 and then quickly do the maintenance on the inside of the shaft or whatever it is they had to do. Or sometimes they would actually have to do repairs on the elevator car itself, in which case they would just kind of go in real quick, do the repairs, get out again. But all of it was predicated on just kind of knowing where the elevator car was in the shaft and being really quick, in and out. And so Jose and the other electricians had done this many times and there was no issues. But on this day, Jose, he got into the elevator shaft to make these simple repairs. And so he actually was standing inside of the shaft on top of the elevator car that was down, a few levels down from 10. And he began making these repairs. And suddenly the car lurched into action because a guest unknowingly had walked into the elevator car and pressed floor 10. And so Jose is on this elevator car that starts moving, and before he can even figure out what's going on, the little opening that he used, the kind of service entrance into the shaft, had been covered up by the elevator car. And so his exit was now gone, and he was now relatively slowly moving up the shaft. Now, Jose would have no idea when this car was going to stop, but if it went to the top, he'd get crushed, and he knew it. And so in kind of a moment of panic, Jose attempted to step to the side to somehow go between the wall and the elevator. It was like he had nowhere to go and he knew it and he just took that path. But there was like an inch of space between the wall and the car. And so the second he did that, the car kept going and it sucked him down into that space and just destroyed him. And so by the time this elevator car reached its destination, the 10th floor, and that guest got off the elevator car, by this point, Jose's body had been totally destroyed and all of his was dripping down the elevator shaft, splattering into the walls and hitting the ground, and it sounded like rain hitting the outside of the ship. And so that's what Sarah and her family were hearing. And then the reason that woman started screaming is she was the first one who turned and saw all this coming down the front of the elevator doors. Medics would arrive quickly on the scene, but there was nothing they could do. Jose was deceased.